Hey, this is Renee, and this is podcast number 16. Are you ready?
Welcome to the ITeachBlogging.com blogcast. Your host, Renee Grosskreutz, talks blog all day long and shares it all. No secrets here to help you become a successful blogger. Listen at the end of today's blogcast on how to get your free PDF of Renee's booklet, Tips on Blogging for Business. Now, here's Renee.
Okay. So today, we're just going to get down to it. At the end of the podcast, I'll have your tip from the last podcast and your SEO tip for today. But I just kind of wanted to switch things up and be a little bit freaky. All right, so let's get down to it. Today, I'm reviewing a blog post by ProBlogger, Darren Rose's website. He's the leading blogger for me. Okay, I'm a big copy blogger fan, Michael Hyatt, Smart Passive Income, Pat Flynn, all these people. But ProBlogger, I think, is the first blogger that I ever started reading on blogging, which may sound funny, but hey, that's what I'm talking about is blogging. So it makes total sense. I've been reading this guy for a long time. Very famous, very awesome blogger. It just so happens this post was not actually written by Darren Rose, but by someone else. I'll link to it in the show notes so that you can check it out for yourself. The blog post is called Content Marketing Smart: Why Your Blog Article is Just the Beginning. Now, I just had a conversation about this issue right before this podcast, coincidentally, unplanned. There was a time when your blog post was everything. Your blog post was what you spent all of your day and all of your time on. The world is different. We're in a media world. Here I am recording a podcast about a blog post that somebody else wrote, and then I'll put a blog post on my blog to hold this podcast. Freaking weird, complicated, but this is the world we live in. So I want to give you a good example of the world that we used to live in. This is on the ProBlogger site, on this blog post. Monday, a couple hours of research, 6 hours of head-down writing, 2, maybe 5 coffee breaks. End result, one 2,000-word comprehensive article on Facebook ad best practices published. Tuesday, a couple hours of research, 6 hours of head-down writing, Wednesday, rinse, repeat, etc., etc. That's the world that we used to live in. We no longer live in that world. So here is a bit more. I want to read this as well before I get into all of the meat of all these things. Previously, Google's search algorithm considered a link to or from your content as a vote in its favor. Longer blog articles could have a greater number of links, increasing their SEO. There were other factors, of course, but now let's talk about what that means, because that all sounds really confusing if you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, and it also sounds really confusing if you do know what the heck I'm talking about. So let's just talk about this for a second before I go on to the hummingbird thing. Basically, you have your website, your URL, and then you have your blog post, which is, your website / blog post title, however your stuff works, right? And if somebody would link to your post in their post, or however they would link to it, in whatever format, if you got enough of those links, Google said, hey, this is really valuable content because a lot of other people are linking to it. And that used to be how you got ranked on the Google search engine, right? So when somebody would type in a keyword phrase and your blog post was the answer to that keyword phrase, if enough people had already linked to it as, hey, this is the answer, then Google would put you up closer to the top or on the first page instead of the 75th page, right? That used to be how things worked, and that made a lot of sense, but it also created a lot of opportunity for cheating, but this is not an SEO podcast, so I won't get into that. But if you're curious, ask me. So here is the new world. With the integration of the Hummingbird algorithm in August, and this post was written a while back, Google's search mechanism changed. For the first time ever, the top of the SEO factor list was the number of Google Plus social endorsements your content had. Links were still important, but the term social media optimization had attained a whole new meaning nonetheless. So what does this mean? Doesn't mean that links are not important, so you can't ignore that, right? Unfortunately, we don't get less to do in the digital world. I always remember when phones and all these digital things first came out, everybody was like, oh, this is going to make our life so much better. That's crap. That's absolute crap. Now we have more. If you're a business owner, which if you're listening to this, you probably are, even if your business is just your blog, there's never less. There's always more. So now you have to think about social. Why is Google Plus the first social? Well, hello, it's owned by Google. So of course they care a lot about how many people share your blog post on Google Plus. That's a huge social ranking for them. The next thing that you have to worry about is all the other social. And then, of course, you still have to think about links. So those are the first things that you need to consider. So what does all this really mean for you, right? Because that's the real question here. The term social media optimization, which is just crazy because you've got search engine optimization, social media optimization, holy crap, right? So what this means is that your content needs to be easy to share on social, and it needs to look good when people share it. Well, how do you control that? Well, there's a few things, and that's why we're doing over this post. So the first thing he says is it means that you need to be producing visually appealing, socially shareable, bite-sized pieces of content that people can love, share, and leave. Well, that sounds pretty, doesn't it? There are 5 tips. Introduce a social share toolbar on your blog's page. Okay, so I use Shareable. I'll link to that. But basically, if you go to my blog post at the bottom, it's going to say, hey, share this, sharing is caring, or some line of crap that they put on there. I can change it, but I don't. Whatever. Too lazy, I guess. But it'll have some social buttons. The Facebook, the Twitter is going to have all of those. And then there's a little plus sign where there's all kinds of other social. By the way, this is a good way to learn what some of the social things out there that are not the most common, that maybe you could get a little more traffic from. So put some kind of social plugin on your blog. So that's very important. He says use Bitly links everywhere you can. This is important. Bitly is important because there's a couple of things that I love about Bitly, and I'm going to be talking about this and doing some videos on this soon. But Bitly is free, first of all, and it's bit.ly. What this does is if your blog post is long, okay, so for example, my blog post is iteachblogging.com / I'll have a category and then / blog title. Well, holy crap, that's going to get really long. That's already going to be more than a tweet, perhaps. Probably not, but most likely. I sure as heck couldn't say anything else. So I need that link to be shortened, and I want to use a Bitly shortener because if somebody shares it or retweets it and then that gets clicked on, I can track that. And that's what I love about Bitly, is that I can track my social stats every single day. So I use Bitly for everything that I possibly can. Sometimes I'm lazy and I don't end up using it, but you can plug it into a lot of things, and it's very, very helpful, and again, free, and I like free. Create appealing and eye-catching header images so your content grabs the attention of social media users. Honestly, this is probably my favorite part of creating any blog post. I use Photo Express, and I buy my images because, well, I worry about the legalities of it all, and they have really cool, badass images that I just like. And then what you want to do, just having a good image is not sufficient, again, because remember, like I said, there's always a lot of work involved here, people. So I do, most of the time, I put some words on top of my image, and I always put my logo on my image. So my featured image for a blog post has the image that's legal, and then it has some words put on top of that or some kind of effect, and then my logo. Now, I use Photoshop for this. Photoshop costs money. It costs time to learn. There are some other cool free things such as PicMonkey. I highly recommend PicMonkey. I think it's cool. It's not as cool as Photoshop, but it's also free, and I like free. So there you go. Create a Pinterest pin with the most interesting statistic for your blog article and put it on your amazing stats board. Okay. So just think about what we've said here. Go create some kind of freaking awesome blog post. Make sure your blog in general, you don't have to do this every time once it's set up, but make sure it has some social share toolbars. Good. Use Bitly. Once it's set up, not a problem. Good. But now you got to create an appealing, eye-catching image for that blog post. Now they want you to create something else, another image for your Pinterest. Good plan. Great idea. But it's going to take you a lot of freaking time, because all these things add up. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be done. It still needs to be done. So what you probably want to do, and let me back up for a second and say something here. I don't have time to do all of these things the right way all the time myself. If you go to Pinterest, you're going to see that my featured image is often my Pinterest image. Should I be doing these things? Absolutely. Would I maybe get better traffic? Absolutely. Do I get to do this all the time? Absolutely not. But we're talking about what you should do. So that's what this is about. Create a Pinterest pin with the most interesting statistic from your blog article. What if your blog article doesn't have a stat? Then pull a freaking good quote or a sentence or something like that. Or just, do something crazy. Like if it's an opinion piece or a theory or an inspiration piece, get a picture of somebody that's like really stressed out or something different. Be unusual. Don't be afraid to be a freak. Okay? Generate content that encourages Facebook likes. I wish I knew the answer to how to freaking do that. But the answer that I do know is they say here, would you share this yourself? That's an important question. But also, I do think having a unique image for Facebook in particular is really valuable. All the statistics that I've been seeing lately and all of the things that I've been seeing other people do is that they create their feature image on their blog post, and then they create a completely different image for their Facebook when they put it on Facebook. And that part of the reason for that is because things resize differently on Facebook. So you want to have like a 450 square image for Facebook. Most of the time your featured images on your blog post are going to be long and wide. They're going to be horizontal or whatever. And that's just not going to work as well. So that's something to think about there, and it's definitely worth doing. So then he says, okay, your 5 pieces of content. You have your well-researched blog article that's interesting. I always notice how they say interesting. It's not like you're going to put out something that you think is boring. It's not like, oh, I woke up today and I'm going to be boring. So that whole interesting thing, I think, just causes pressure. But whatever. Then they're going to say, create a SlideShare presentation from this blog research. This is really, really amazing stuff. SlideShare is free. Again, good. Basically, what this means is you're going to create a PowerPoint, and then you're going to upload it to your SlideShare account. I've been using SlideShare. I really like it a lot. I wish that I had enough time in the world so that I could create more SlideShares. I'm kind of working on things in stages, and I'm going to actually do a podcast and a video about this, about my stages of things. But right now, I am not personally focusing a lot on SlideShare, but you will start seeing more and more of those from me in the future. They're super simple to create. PowerPoint is something that everybody understands more so than Photoshop. And I think it's a very valuable tool. And it's amazing the stats that come from them. I have known people just get massive numbers from their SlideShare. It's crazy. I do not know who is looking at all these SlideShares, but it's awesome. Comment on influencers' content and social platforms. Okay. So now we got to create all these awesome images, create some great content. We've got to create a SlideShare, and now we got to take the time to comment. This is crucial because you want to become part of a community. So comment on influencers' content. Now, I want to say something about this that I feel. I feel as though when somebody's gotten to the point of ProBlogger, I'm not saying to never comment, but you're probably not going to be able to get that direct attention or connection with Darren Rose. No offense, Darren Rose, but there's so many people that look at this blog of his every single day. I mean, when you're getting, 20,000, 30,000 hits a day, I don't know if he's getting that many. I'll look up the stats. I'd be kind of curious to know. I know it's a lot. Then there's no way that he can pay attention to every single one of these comments, right? But if you start figuring out who is the people that are commenting, and then you follow up with them and you find them, so maybe you find the commenters instead and really start connecting with those. That's my personal strategy. Like, for example, I keep talking about Pat Flynn. I've become a huge fan of Pat Flynn, and that's fantastic. And Pat Flynn is still approachable at this time. However, I'm seeing that transition of where he's getting so much coming at him every single day that I don't foresee that remaining the case. So what I want to do is connect with the other people like me that like Pat Flynn. So I want to find them, and then I want to comment on their blog post. And that helps them. I can maybe develop a relationship with them, and that helps you. So start trying to find the followers of the influencers. That is my tip for you. Next thing he says is build an infographic from the blog research that you've done for this blog post. So that's another piece of content. I have never made an infographic. I would love to. The idea of it is so overwhelming, but there are infographic pieces of software out there called Visually, I think is one of them. I've tried to play with it a bit. Honestly, I just couldn't get into it. I think infographics are great. And if you can create one, or you go to Fiverr and you hire somebody to create one for you, this is going to be a big hit. If you have the ability or you have the money, I highly recommend doing an infographic. I have not done them. And part of it for me is I'm already doing so many new things that I'm having to pick and choose which things to do. So I can give you great advice, but I can't necessarily implement it all myself because, well, I'm still trying to run the business and get this off the ground. So that's just me. Because remember, my whole mantra is to be boldly transparent. Last thing is, put together an ebook from the longer form blog articles. This is a great, great, great idea. And again, it's creating something new. So, ebooks are wonderful. People like to have things to download. I try to read as many as I possibly can. They do not have to be long. So when he's saying this here, ebook built from a longer form blog article, he is not saying go and make some 90-page, 300-page ebook. What he's saying is take maybe your best few blog posts on the title. So like if you do a series post, maybe take all of that content and put it into an ebook, because keep in mind, you might be like, well, it's already on my blog post. This is true. But what you're doing is creating convenience for people. So maybe somebody is really interested in reading this content and you've created this series or this super long thing and people want to be able to read it when they're not online, right? And so that could be really valuable. So I think this is a terrific tip. It's one that I am starting to implement myself. I just created a 12-part series, and I'm going to do the entire series. I'm going to put it all out over the next 12 weeks, and then at the end, I'm going to put it into a little ebook. Because everybody comes to you in different ways. For example, you may listen to my podcast but never go to my blog. You may go to my blog but never listen to my podcast. You may get my ebook but not listen to the podcast. So everybody is everywhere. And so you want to reach people where they are and then try to draw them into you more. That's the goal. So here he says, blog article, put some serious time and energy into your blog articles. I'm talking 1,800 word plus words. Not every blog post has to be that long, by the way. The typical blog post these days, the rule of thumb is still 400 to 600 words. We're talking super long post here. We're talking epic content. Not every post has to be epic. I don't even think you should spend the time trying to make every post epic, because not everybody wants to read an epic post. Sometimes they just want to get down to it and know what exactly you're trying to say. So if you put together an epic post, make sure that it truly, truly adds the value that you're looking for. But as you're going through and you're working on these epic posts, start paying attention to the content, the research that you're doing. Hey, this would be a great statistic. Maybe it doesn't make the cut for your blog post, but maybe it would be really wonderful for your PowerPoint, for example, or for your ebook. So start paying attention to the research that you're doing and using it for multiple sources. Okay, so that is really what I really wanted to get down to and go over those particular tips here, because in the end, like I said at the beginning, we are a media company now. We're not just bloggers. It's not just about the words. You people are visual. You have Instagram, you have SlideShare, you have YouTube, you have video. Making a video to go along with a blog post, absolutely, absolutely. If you can at all, if all you do is sit in front of a camera and talk about your blog post and go, okay, here's the first 5 tips of my blog post, and I want to tell you a little bit more, because frankly, it's a little bit easier sometimes to sit in front of a camera, if you're not camera shy, of course, and talk about something than it is to try to figure out how to write it. Or at least that's the case for me. Writing is my biggest enemy. I love trying, but talking is the best thing that I can do. Unless you haven't made it this far into the podcast, then, I guess that's debatable. So go through, read this article from ProBlogger. I have really given you the short version, but I just thought it was really, really right on with where I'm seeing things go. And I just think when you're thinking about your content, think about everything that you could possibly do with it. You're not going to be able to do as much with a 400 to 600 word blog post, most likely, unless it's like a list post. But with those epic pieces, you definitely can. So let's go back to the beginning of this as the final thoughts here. He was talking about Monday, write for 6 hours. Tuesday, write for 6 hours, 2 hours of research a day, and just keep going and going. Maybe you don't need to blog as frequently. That's really where this conversation is heading as I'm reading other bloggers and other people that talk about this content, is maybe the frequency isn't as important as the quality, and making sure that you're thinking in the terms of media and not just words. That is where I'm headed. I'm working on a 3-day-a-week thing, and then I'm going to throw in bonus content from there, because I really do realize I need to be thinking a lot about the media too. I need to be spending more time on the Pinterest images, for example, and the Facebook images and the slide shares. But all of that stuff takes a lot of planning. So if you feel completely overwhelmed and you're listening to this and you're thinking, holy crap, I can't do all of this, then just do what it is that you can do. Because doing some piece of this is better than nothing. Will you get as found? Maybe not. Maybe you will. You just don't know. I mean, things happen all the time. There's success stories out there like crazy. But when you are putting together your content, start thinking to yourself, what more could I do with this? And that is what I wanted to talk about today. So now we'll go on to the SEO. Okay, so here's a tip from the last podcast. Podcast number 15, why you should own your domain name. If there's one thing that I would like to recommend to all business owners above all things, sounded funny, is that you must own your URL, your domain name. I have run across so many people that started their blog on www.yourcompanyname.wordpress.com or on yourcompanyname.tumblr.com or .blogspot.com or even on Weebly, and now realize they need to move it. I get into a lot more detail in that podcast, but I can promise you that this is something that you will hear from me over and over again. I will preach it until they take my computer away. So now, here's your quick and simple SEO tip. Don't publish blank pages. Okay, I'll say a little bit more. When you are working on a page for your blog, it is tempting to publish it so that you can easily share it or easily read it. Don't do that. Don't. Blank pages are bad for SEO. People can happen across your page even if it is not linked to or in a navigation bar. Seriously, they find it. It's really freaking weird. It happens, and when it happens, people leave. So that is my quick and easy tip for you. Just don't publish it. And that is it. So, thank you so much for listening to this blog post. Blog on. Thank you for listening to ITeachBlogging.com blogcast with me, Renee Grosskreutz. Visit ITeachBlogging.com/show notes. I will have the PDF download for you at that link, along with useful links that we talked about today. Go forth and blog.